Abandoned at the altar. A mail-order bride's fight for freedom. The train's whistle cut through the Wyoming heat like a scream. Evelyn Carter stepped onto the platform, her heart hammering against her ribs as she scanned the crowd for the man who'd promised her a new life. But William Garrett wasn't there. The platform emptied. The sun beat down mercilessly. And then she understood. She'd been abandoned before she'd even arrived. Alone in a strange town with $17 and a suitcase full of borrowed hope, Evelyn felt the weight of every stare, every whisper. Then a small boy with tear-streaked cheeks broke through the crowd and threw his arms around her waist, burying his face in her skirt. "Mama?" he whispered, the single word fracturing something deep in her chest. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far Evelyn's story travels. And if you're curious whether she finds her way home, stay until the very end. The boy's father reached them in 3 long strides, his face carved from the same unforgiving stone as the mountains behind him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of storm clouds, gray, distant, and guarded. His hands, rough and calloused, gripped the child's shoulders gently but firmly, pulling him back. "Noah, we talked about this." His voice was low, careful, as though he were trying not to shatter something already broken. "But Papa, she looks like—" The boy's words dissolved into sobs. "She's not your mama." The man's jaw tightened, and for a moment something raw flickered across his features before he locked it away. He looked up at Evelyn then, and she saw the exact instant he registered her situation. The trunk at her feet, the traveling dress wilted from 2 days on the rails, the telegram clutched in her trembling hand. "I'm sorry, miss. My son, we lost his mother 6 months back." The words came out flat, practiced, as if he'd said them so many times they'd lost all meaning. He doesn't understand yet. Evelyn's throat burned. She wanted to say something gracious, something that would ease the awkwardness settling between them like dust, but all she could manage was, "It's all right." It wasn't all right. Nothing was all right. The man studied her face, then glanced at the telegram. "You waiting for someone?" "I was." Evelyn forced herself to meet his eyes. "William Garrett. Do you know him?" Something dangerous shifted in the stranger's expression. His hand dropped from his son's shoulder, fingers curling into a loose fist. "I know him." The way he said it made Evelyn's stomach drop. "He's not coming, is he?" "No, miss, I don't believe he is." The man looked away toward the mountains as if the answer might be written somewhere in those distant peaks. "Victor Langdon, goes by William Garrett sometimes, among other names. He's got a reputation. Brings women out here with promises, takes what money they have, then disappears before the ink dries on the marriage certificate. If he didn't show today, it means he already got what he wanted." Evelyn's vision blurred. The $17 in her handbag, it was all she had left after paying for the train ticket he'd insisted she purchase herself. Her mother's wedding ring, sold to cover the fare. The small inheritance from her aunt sent ahead to help establish their household. All of it, gone. And she was stranded 1,500 miles from Boston with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. "I see." Her voice sounded strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else. The crowd had thinned, but a few stragglers remained, their curiosity sharp as broken glass. She felt their stares like brands against her skin. Pity mixed with judgment, the particular contempt reserved for women foolish enough to trust, desperate enough to hope. The man shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "You got family back east?" "No." The word came out smaller than she intended. "No one." Noah had stopped crying, but he still watched her with those enormous brown eyes, his small hand clutching his father's coat. The resemblance between them was striking. The same strong jaw, the same thick dark hair, the same expression of carefully contained grief. "Listen," the man said finally, his voice rough. "I can't leave you standing here. The boarding house is 2 miles into town, and it's not—" He paused, choosing his words. "It's not a place for a woman alone. My ranch is an hour's ride north. It's not much, but it's decent. You can stay there tonight, figure out what comes next in the morning." Evelyn's pride reared up instinctively. She'd spent the last 3 years caring for her dying father, then another year as a seamstress in a cramped boarding house, sewing until her fingers bled just to keep a roof over her head. She'd accepted this mail-order arrangement because she'd run out of options, not because she was helpless. But pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. "I can work," she said. "I won't take charity. I'm good with a needle. I can cook, clean, manage a household. If you'll give me shelter, I'll earn my keep." Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "Fair enough. Name's Jacob Hale. This is my boy, Noah." "Evelyn Carter." Jacob nodded once, then turned toward a wagon hitched nearby. "We'll collect your trunk." The ride north was silent except for the creak of wagon wheels and the steady rhythm of hoofbeats. Noah sat between them, his small body warm against Evelyn's side. She could feel him stealing glances at her, quick and furtive, as if he were afraid she might disappear if he looked too long. The landscape unfurled in shades of gold and amber, endless sky pressing down on endless earth. Mountains rose in the distance like sleeping giants, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer heat. The air smelled of sage and dust and something wild she couldn't name. It was beautiful and brutal and utterly foreign, nothing like the narrow cobbled streets of Boston, the pressed gardens, the ordered civility of everything she'd known. "First time west?" Jacob asked. "Yes." "It's hard country. Takes getting used to." Evelyn looked at the horizon, at the vast emptiness that seemed to swallow sound and hope alike. "Everything's hard when you're starting from nothing." He glanced at her, and for the first time she saw something like understanding in his eyes. "I suppose that's true." The ranch appeared gradually, emerging from the landscape like it had grown there. A 2-story house with a wraparound porch, a barn weathered silver by sun and wind, corrals holding a handful of horses, and beyond them, cattle scattered across rolling pasture. It was modest, functional, built for endurance rather than beauty. Jacob pulled the wagon up to the house and climbed down, then reached for Noah. The boy went reluctantly, his eyes still fixed on Evelyn. "House hasn't had a woman's touch in some time," Jacob said, lifting her trunk as if it weighed nothing. "I've kept it clean, but it's plain." "Plain is fine." Inside, the house was exactly what he'd described, clean but stark, functional but lonely. The furniture was simple and well made, the floors swept, the windows letting in long rectangles of golden light. But there were gaps, absences that spoke louder than words. A rocking chair by the hearth with no cushion, a kitchen with no curtains, a sideboard with no photographs, no letters, no small personal touches that transform a house into a home. Jacob set her trunk down in a small room off the kitchen. This was the hired man's room before. Well, it's yours now. There's a basin and pitcher, linens in the chest. Supper's at 6. Thank you. He nodded and left, his boot steps heavy on the floorboards, Noah's lighter steps trailing behind. Evelyn stood alone in the small room, her reflection wavering in the mirror above the washstand. She looked like a ghost, pale, hollow-eyed, her traveling dress rumpled and dusty. Slowly she unpinned her hat, then her hair, letting it fall in dark waves around her shoulders. She poured water into the basin and washed her face, her hands, trying to scrub away the feeling of William Garrett's betrayal, the humiliation of standing abandoned on that platform. But shame doesn't wash off. It settles into your bones, becomes part of your marrow. She changed into a simpler dress, then ventured into the kitchen. It was clear Jacob had been managing on his own. The space was organized but impersonal, the cupboards holding only essentials. She found potatoes, onions, a haunch of salt pork, some flour and lard. Enough to make something decent. As she worked, her hands found their rhythm, the familiar comfort of peeling, chopping, measuring. Cooking had always steadied her, the alchemy of transforming raw ingredients into something nourishing and whole. She made biscuits and fried the salt pork with onions and potatoes, then set the table for 3. When Jacob and Noah returned from the evening chores, they both stopped in the doorway, staring at the set table, the steam rising from the plates. "Smells good," Jacob said quietly. Noah climbed into his chair without prompting, his eyes wide. "Like Mama used to make." Jacob's jaw tightened, but he didn't correct the boy. They ate in silence, the scrape of forks against plates the only sound. Evelyn noticed how carefully Jacob cut Noah's food, how he made sure the boy drank his milk, the tender attentiveness beneath his rough exterior. "This is fine cooking, Miss Carter," Jacob said finally. "Been a while since we had a proper meal. Please, call me Evelyn."
Evelyn, then. He met her eyes across the table. "We rise early here, 4:30. I'll need help with breakfast, packing lunches, keeping the house. If you're willing, there's mending needs doing, and Noah could use some schooling. His mother used to teach him letters and numbers, but I'm not much good at it." "I can do that." Noah looked up, hope blazing across his small face. "You'll teach me reading?" "If you'd like." "Mama was teaching me. She said I was real smart." Jacob's knuckles went white around his fork, but his voice remained steady. "You are smart, son. Your mama was right about that." After supper, while Jacob put Noah to bed, Evelyn washed the dishes and tidied the kitchen. She could hear them upstairs, Jacob's low rumble, Noah's higher voice, then silence. When Jacob came back down, his eyes were red-rimmed, his shoulders heavy. "He asks for her every night," he said, staring at the floor. "Wants to know when she's coming back. I keep telling him she's not, that she's in heaven, but he's 5. He doesn't understand forever." Evelyn dried her hands on a towel, choosing her words carefully. "Grief doesn't follow logic, especially for children." Jacob looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw the exhaustion carved into every line of his face. "His mother, Sarah, she died birthing our second child. Baby didn't make it either. One day we were a family, the next, I buried them both on a Tuesday. Noah won't go near their graves, won't talk about her except to ask when she's coming home." "I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate, but there was nothing else to offer. "Why'd you come west, Evelyn? Really?" She could have lied, could have dressed it up in prettier words. But this man had offered her shelter when she had nothing, and he deserved honesty. "Because I had no other choice. My father died 3 years ago. Left debts I couldn't cover. I worked as a seamstress, but the pay was barely enough for rent. When I saw William's advertisement, a rancher seeking a wife, promising a home and partnership, it seemed like Providence. I know how foolish that sounds now. It doesn't sound foolish. It sounds desperate. There's a difference." She looked up, surprised by the gentleness in his voice. "We're all desperate in our own ways," Jacob continued. "That's why we end up in places like this, doing things we never imagined. The West doesn't draw dreamers so much as it draws people who've run out of other options. Is that why you're here?" He smiled, but there was no humor in it. "I came here with Sarah 10 years ago. Her father owned this land, left it to her when he passed. We were going to build something, a real ranch, a legacy for our children. Now I'm just trying to keep Noah fed and the cattle from starving, some legacy." "You're doing more than that. You're raising a child on your own, keeping a ranch running, and you still had enough decency to help a stranger. That counts for something." Jacob's expression softened. "Maybe. Or maybe I just couldn't stomach the idea of another woman getting hurt by Victor Langdon's schemes." "You said he has a reputation. Has he done this before?" "At least 3 times that I know of. Brings women out, takes their money, then vanishes. Sometimes he marries them first so he can claim legal right to their property. Sometimes he just disappears. Either way, the women end up stranded with nothing. One of them died last winter, froze to death trying to walk back to town after he abandoned her 20 miles outside Cheyenne." Evelyn's blood turned cold. "And no one stops him?" "He's careful, uses different names, works different territories, never stays long enough for the law to catch up. And the women he targets? They're desperate, alone, ashamed. Most don't report it because they blame themselves for being foolish enough to trust him." "That's not foolishness. That's hope." Evelyn's voice came out harder than she intended. "And he exploits it." "Yes." Jacob's eyes met hers. "He does." They stood in the quiet kitchen, the lamplight casting long shadows across the walls. Outside, the night pressed against the windows, vast and dark, and full of sounds she didn't recognize. The distant howl of coyotes, the whisper of wind through grass, the creak of the house settling into itself. "You should get some rest," Jacob said finally. "Tomorrow starts early." Evelyn nodded and retreated to her small room. She lay in the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of this unfamiliar place. Everything she'd known was gone. Her father, her home, the life she'd built in Boston. Even the future she'd imagined, fragile as it was, had been stolen before she could touch it.
But as she lay there in the darkness, she thought about Noah's small arms around her waist, the word mama, whispered like a prayer. She thought about Jacob's careful tenderness with his son, the grief he carried like a stone in his chest. She thought about the meals she'd cooked, the table she'd set, the small act of creating order in a house haunted by absence. Maybe she'd been abandoned. Maybe she'd lost everything, but she wasn't dead. And tomorrow she would rise at 4:30 and prove that survival was its own kind of victory. The days fell into a rhythm so quickly it startled her. Evelyn rose before dawn, started the coffee, made breakfast while Jacob and Noah did the morning chores. After breakfast, she cleaned the kitchen, made the beds, swept the floors. Then she'd sit with Noah at the kitchen table, teaching him letters and numbers while Jacob worked the ranch. Noah was bright, eager, soaking up knowledge like parched earth soaks up rain. He'd trace letters in the flour she spread across the table, sounding out words with fierce concentration. When he got something right, his whole face would light up, and he'd look at her with such pure joy it made her chest ache. "Miss Evelyn, is this right? C-A-T? Cat. Perfect, Noah. You're doing wonderfully." Mama would be proud, wouldn't she? Evelyn's throat tightened. Yes, sweetheart, she would be very proud. In the afternoons, she mended clothes, tended the vegetable garden Sarah had planted years ago, now overgrown but still producing. She found herself talking to the memory of the woman who'd lived here before her, wondering what Sarah had been like, what dreams she'd carried, what plans she'd made that would never come to fruition. Jacob kept his distance, polite but guarded. He thanked her for meals, acknowledged her work with curt nods, but never lingered in conversation. He was civil, respectful, and utterly closed off. She understood. To let her in would mean acknowledging that life continued, that the space Sarah left behind could be filled, and he wasn't ready for that. But Noah had no such reservations. He followed Evelyn everywhere, chattering about the ranch, the animals, his mother's favorite songs. He showed her the creek where Sarah used to take him fishing, the meadow where they'd picked wildflowers, the tree with their initials carved into the bark. "Papa won't come here anymore," Noah said, tracing the letters with his finger. "He says it makes him sad." "Everyone grieves differently, Noah. Your papa needs time." "Do you think Mama's watching us from heaven?" Evelyn chose her words carefully. "I think if there's any justice in the world, the people who loved us never truly leave. They stay in our hearts, in our memories, in the good things they taught us." Noah considered this, then slipped his hand into hers. "I'm glad you came, Miss Evelyn. Even if you're not my real mama, I'm glad you're here." She had to turn away so he wouldn't see her tears. 3 weeks passed, then 4. Evelyn stopped thinking of the arrangement as temporary and started noticing details, the way Jacob's hands gentled when he touched his son, the small kindnesses he showed the animals, the weight he carried in silence. She noticed how he'd stand on the porch at dusk, staring toward the graves on the hill, his shoulders bowed like he was carrying the world. One evening, she found him in the barn, forehead pressed against his horse's neck, shaking. "Jacob?" He straightened immediately, swiping at his eyes. "I'm fine." "You don't have to be." "Yes, I do. For Noah, he needs a father who's human, not one who's pretending nothing hurts." She stepped closer, her voice soft. "You don't have to carry this alone." "I've been carrying it alone for 6 months. Don't know any other way." "Then maybe it's time to learn." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw the moment his defenses cracked. "I don't know how to do this, any of this. I'm failing him, Evelyn. He cries for his mother every night, and I can't give her back to him. I can't fix it. I can't make it better. I'm just here, breathing, barely." "That's enough. Breathing is enough. Everything else comes after." Jacob's laugh was broken, bitter. "You sound like Sarah." Then she was wise. They stood in the barn's dusty light, the smell of hay and horses thick around them. Evelyn didn't reach for him, didn't offer empty comfort. She just stood there, present, witness to his pain. "Thank you," he said finally, "for staying, for helping with Noah, for being here." I have nowhere else to be. That's not true anymore. You could leave, find work in town, start over. Is that what you want? No. The word came fast, sharp, surprising them both. No, I don't want you to leave. Something shifted in the air between them, delicate and dangerous. Evelyn felt it like static before a storm, the way the world holds its breath before lightning strikes. Then I'll stay, she said, as long as you'll have me. Jacob nodded, not trusting himself to speak. That night, over supper, Noah looked between them with an expression far too knowing for a 5-year-old. Papa, are you and Miss Evelyn going to get married? Jacob choked on his coffee. Evelyn's fork clattered against her plate. Noah, we're not. Jacob fumbled for words. Why not? You like her. I like her. Mama would like her too. She always said we should help people who need help, and Miss Evelyn needed help. Now she's helping us. That's what families do. It's more complicated than that, son. Why? It was a fair question, really. Out of the mouths of babes came the kind of logic that shattered adult pretense. Evelyn found her voice. Your father and I are friends, Noah. Good friends. But marriage is different. Mama and Papa were friends, she told me. She said the best marriages start with friendship. Jacob's eyes were distant, lost in memory. She did say that. The conversation ended there, but the question hung in the air like smoke, impossible to dispel. That night, lying in her narrow bed, Evelyn let herself imagine it, not out of romance, but out of brutal practicality. She had no money, no prospects, nowhere to go. Jacob had a child who needed mothering, and a ranch that needed a woman's hand. It would be a partnership, nothing more, a business arrangement dressed up in vows. But even as she thought it, she knew that was a lie. Because when she closed her eyes, she saw Jacob's face in the barn, saw the raw humanity beneath his grief. She saw Noah's bright eyes and heard his laughter. She felt the satisfaction of a day's work, the pleasure of sitting on the porch as the sun set, watching the land turn gold. She was building something here. Not the life she'd planned, but a life nonetheless. And she wasn't ready to give that up. 2 more weeks passed in quiet routine. Evelyn had just finished hanging laundry when she heard hoofbeats approaching fast. She turned to see a rider coming hard up the road, dust rising in plumes behind him. Jacob emerged from the barn, his hand moving instinctively toward the rifle propped by the door. The rider pulled up short, a young man, barely 20, his face flushed with urgency. Mr. Hale, there's trouble in town. Victor Langdon's back and he's asking about a woman named Evelyn Carter. Says she's his intended bride, that she ran off with his money. Sheriff wants to talk to her. Evelyn's world tilted. She gripped the porch railing, her knuckles white. Jacob's expression went cold and hard as winter stone. You tell the sheriff Evelyn Carter is under my protection and has been since the day she arrived. If Victor Langdon wants to press charges, he can answer some questions of his own, starting with why he abandoned her at the train station and what he did with the money she sent ahead. The young man nodded. Yes, sir. But Mr. Hale, he's got papers, a contract, says she owes him for the train fare and breach of promise. Those papers are worth less than the lies they're printed on. Maybe so, but the sheriff says you should bring her in. Let it get sorted legal-like. Jacob turned to Evelyn, his eyes blazing. Pack a bag. We're going to town, and we're ending this. The ride into town felt longer than the hour it took. Evelyn sat rigid in the wagon beside Jacob, her hands twisted in her lap, while Noah pressed against her side, sensing the tension crackling through the air like heat lightning. Jacob's jaw was set, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, and he hadn't spoken since they'd left the ranch except to tell Noah to stay close once they reached town. The main street of Cedar Ridge was wider than Evelyn remembered, lined with false-fronted buildings that seemed to lean toward one another like gossips sharing secrets. Horses stood hitched outside the saloon, their tails swishing at flies. A few women in bonnets paused their shopping to stare as the wagon rolled past, their eyes sharp with curiosity. Jacob pulled up in front of the sheriff's office, a squat building with barred windows and a hitching post worn smooth by years of use. He climbed down and reached for Noah, but the boy clung to Evelyn's hand. I want to stay with Miss Evelyn. Noah, let him come, Evelyn said quietly.
He'll be frightened alone. Jacob's mouth tightened, but he nodded.
They walked into the sheriff's office together, Noah's small hand gripping Evelyn's with desperate strength. The sheriff was a heavy-set man with a graying mustache and eyes that had seen too much to be easily fooled. He stood when they entered, his gaze moving from Jacob to Evelyn with careful assessment. "Mr. Hale, Miss Carter, I presume?" "Yes." Evelyn's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I'm Sheriff Tom Brennan. I appreciate you coming in. We've got ourselves a situation here that needs sorting." He gestured toward the door leading to the back cells. "Victor Langdon's made some serious accusations. Says you stole $300 from him and ran off to avoid marriage." "That's a lie." The words burst from Evelyn before she could stop them. "He's the thief. I sent him $215 to help establish our household, and he abandoned me at the train station. I've never seen him in my life except in a photograph he sent with his letters." "She's been at my ranch since the day she arrived," Jacob added, his voice like iron, "earning her keep honestly. Whatever Victor Langdon claims, he's the one who committed fraud." Sheriff Brennan pulled out a chair. "Why don't we all sit down and go through this proper-like? Miss Carter, you start from the beginning." Evelyn sat, her spine straight despite the trembling in her hands. Noah climbed into her lap without asking, his weight a small comfort. She told the story exactly as it happened. The advertisement she'd seen in the Boston newspaper, the letters from William Garrett describing his ranch and his desire for a wife to help build a future, the money she'd sent at his request, the train ticket she'd purchased, the empty platform where he'd promised to meet her. "Do you have the letters?" Sheriff Brennan asked. "Yes, in my trunk at Mr. Hale's ranch." "And the receipts for the money you sent?" "I have the bank draft receipt showing I sent $215 to William Garrett in care of the Cedar Ridge post office." The sheriff made notes, his expression unreadable. "And you say you'd never met this man before you arrived?" "Never. Everything was arranged through correspondence." "Did he make any promises in writing? Marriage, property, that sort of thing?" "Yes. He promised marriage within a week of my arrival and said we'd run the ranch together as equal partners. He said he'd already prepared the marriage license and secured the preacher." Sheriff Brennan's eyebrows rose. "That right? And when you got here and he wasn't at the station, what did you do?" "I stood there until the platform cleared, trying to figure out what to do. That's when Noah ran up to me and Mr. Hale explained who William Garrett really was." "Victor Langdon," Jacob said flatly. "I've known him for 3 years. He worked on ranches around here under various names, always leaving sudden-like when money went missing or women came looking for him. Last I heard, he'd moved on to Denver. Didn't expect him to show his face here again." The sheriff leaned back in his chair, studying them both. "Here's where it gets complicated. Victor's got papers too. A contract signed by both of you agreeing to marriage, with a clause saying if you breach the agreement, you owe him restitution for expenses incurred. He's claiming you got cold feet when you saw the ranch wasn't as grand as you expected and ran off to find a richer man." Evelyn's face burned. "I never signed any contract. I never even met him to sign anything." "This signature here looks mighty official." The sheriff pushed a document across the desk. Evelyn stared at it. The handwriting was similar to hers, the same loops and curves she'd practiced in finishing school, but the tremor in the downstrokes was wrong, and the capital E had a flourish she never used. "That's not my signature, it's a forgery." "You able to prove that?" "I can show you my real handwriting. The letters I sent him, my teaching notes for Noah, anything you want." "I'll need to see those letters, both the ones you sent and the ones he sent you." Sheriff Brennan stood. "Brennan, Miss Carter, I'm going to bring Victor in here so he can state his case. Mr. Hale, I'd appreciate it if you'd step outside with the boy. This might get heated." "I'm not leaving her alone with that bastard." Jacob's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath. "I'm the law here, Mr. Hale, and I'll keep order. But if you stay, you keep your temper. Understood?" Jacob's eyes met Evelyn's, asking a silent question. She nodded slightly. He stepped back but positioned himself by the door, his arms crossed, his whole body radiating threat. Sheriff Brennan disappeared into the back and returned with a man who made Evelyn's stomach turn. Victor Langdon was handsome in a slick, calculated way. Dark hair, pomaded back, a suit that was too fine for ranch country, eyes that assessed her like she was livestock at auction. He smiled when he saw her, showing white teeth. Evelyn, darling, I'm so relieved you're safe. When you disappeared, I feared the worst. The endearment made her skin crawl. Don't call me that. You abandoned me. Is that what he told you? Victor's voice dripped sympathy as he gestured toward Jacob. My dear, I was delayed by business in Cheyenne. When I arrived at the station 3 hours late, you were gone. I've been searching for you ever since, worried sick. And then I hear you've been living at another man's ranch? Can you imagine how that looks? You're a liar. Evelyn's voice shook with rage. You were never coming. You took my money and disappeared, just like you've done to other women. Victor's expression hardened for just a moment before the mask slipped back into place. I don't know what stories you've been told, but I assure you I had every intention of fulfilling our agreement. I have the marriage license right here, dated for 3 days after your scheduled arrival. I have the contract we both signed. I have receipts showing I spent considerable money preparing for your arrival, furniture, household goods, all purchased in anticipation of our life together. He spread papers across the sheriff's desk with a magician's flourish. Evelyn stared at them, her mind reeling. They looked official. Stamps, signatures, dates that aligned with his story, the forged contract with her name, a marriage license application, receipts from merchants in Cheyenne. Sheriff, I came here in good faith, Victor continued, his voice reasonable, wounded. I courted this woman honorably, made her an honest proposal, and she agreed. Now I find her living with another man, my money spent, my reputation damaged. I'm not asking for anything unreasonable. I just want what's owed to me. Either she honors our agreement and becomes my wife, or she repays the money I invested in good faith. $300 is what you're claiming? Sheriff Brennan asked. $215 she sent, plus $85 I spent on preparations. I have the receipts. Evelyn felt the trap closing around her. She had $17 left in the world. Even if the sheriff believed her, even if he dismissed Victor's claims, she had no way to pay him back. And without money, she had no way to leave Cedar Ridge, no way to start over somewhere else. I'd like to see those letters Miss Carter mentioned, the sheriff said. The ones that started this whole arrangement. Of course. Victor pulled a bundle from his coat pocket. I kept every one. You can see how eager she was to marry me, how she agreed to all my terms. Evelyn's hands trembled as she took the letters. They were hers. She recognized her own handwriting, her own words. But as she read them, she felt sick. Phrases had been taken out of context, sentences rearranged. Where she'd written, I hope we can build a partnership based on mutual respect, he'd somehow made it read like desperate eagerness. Where she'd written, I'm willing to work hard to establish our household, it sounded like she was offering servitude. These aren't complete, she said. He's cut them up, rearranged them. Where I asked questions about the ranch, the arrangements, whether we'd have time to know each other before marriage, all of that is missing. Do you have copies? No? Who keeps copies of personal letters? Victor spread his hands in a gesture of reasonableness. Sheriff, I think it's clear what happened here. Miss Carter arrived, met Mr. Hale, a man with better prospects than a simple rancher like myself, and decided to trade up. I bear her no ill will, truly, but I do expect restitution for the financial loss and the damage to my reputation. You son of a... Jacob started forward, but the sheriff held up a hand. Mr. Hale, I warned you. He's lying, Tom. You know his reputation. How many other women has he pulled this scheme on? Rumors aren't evidence, Sheriff Brennan said, though his eyes were troubled. And right now, he's got papers, and she's got accusations. I can provide witnesses, Evelyn said desperately. In Boston, people who knew me, who can verify my character. Boston's 2,000 miles away, Victor interrupted smoothly. By the time we sent letters and waited for responses, months would pass. Surely we can settle this more efficiently. The sheriff rubbed his jaw, thinking. Miss Carter, you got any proof at all that this man wasn't at the station when you arrived? Anyone who saw you waiting alone? There were people on the platform, but I don't know their names. I was watching for William, for him, and he never appeared. I was delayed, Victor said again, patience edging toward irritation. 3 hours delayed. Surely someone remembers seeing me arrive, frantic, searching for my bride? I can ask around, the sheriff said.
Noah, who'd been silent in Evelyn's lap, suddenly spoke up. He's a bad man. Miss Evelyn doesn't lie. She teaches me reading and makes Papa smile again. We want her to stay. Victor's mask slipped again, annoyance flashing across his features. How touching. You've already installed her as a replacement mother. Tell me, Mr. Hale, what exactly is the nature of your relationship with my intended bride? Watch your mouth, Jacob growled. It's a fair question. She's been living under your roof, unchaperoned, for what, 6 weeks now? And you expect people to believe nothing improper has occurred? The insinuation hung in the air like poison. Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. She understood then what Victor was really doing. If he couldn't force her to marry him, he'd destroy her reputation so thoroughly she'd have no choice but to accept his terms or leave town in disgrace. Miss Carter has been earning her keep as household help, Jacob said, each word bitten off sharp. Nothing more. Of course. Victor's smile was cruel. Though I imagine the good people of Cedar Ridge might wonder why a respectable rancher would take in a strange woman, provide her room and board, and expect nothing in return, especially a grieving widower with certain needs. Jacob's fist connected with Victor's jaw before anyone could stop him. Victor stumbled back, blood spraying from his split lip, and then everything erupted into chaos. The sheriff shouted, men rushed in from outside, and Noah started crying in Evelyn's arms. That's enough! Sheriff Brennan hauled Jacob back. I could arrest you for assault, Hale. Then arrest me. But don't stand there and let him slander a decent woman. Victor dabbed at his bloody lip with a handkerchief, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. You see, Sheriff? The man's violent, unstable, and you're leaving an innocent woman in his care? Innocent? Evelyn's voice cut through the commotion. She stood, settling Noah on the chair, and faced Victor with every ounce of courage she could muster. You're a fraud and a predator. You lure desperate women west with promises you never intend to keep, you steal their money, and you abandon them to suffer the consequences. I don't care what papers you've forged or what lies you've told. I will not marry you. I will not give you another cent, and I will not let you destroy my life just because your scheme didn't work this time. The room went silent. Victor's expression turned ugly. Careful, Miss Carter. You're making serious accusations against an upstanding businessman. Then let's test them. Sheriff, send a telegram to the authorities in Cheyenne, Denver, Colorado Springs. Ask if they have any complaints against a man matching his description using various names. Ask the postmaster here if William Garrett received any other money orders in the last year. Check the records. Sheriff Brennan's eyes sharpened. That's not a bad idea. She's grasping at straws, Victor said, but there was tension in his voice now. This is absurd. I have legal documents. I want what I'm owed. And you'll get a legal hearing, the sheriff said. But it won't be today. I'm going to investigate Miss Carter's claims, verify these papers of yours, and talk to some folks who might remember seeing you at the station or not seeing you. Until then, nobody's paying anybody anything, and nobody's getting married. How long will this take? Long as it takes. Could be a week, could be a month. Victor's composure cracked. A month? I have business to attend to. I can't sit around this backwater town for a month. Then you should have thought of that before you started making legal claims, Sheriff Brennan said mildly. You're free to leave any time, but if you do, I'll assume you're withdrawing your complaint. Victor's jaw worked. Fine, 1 week. But I expect this resolved in my favor, or I'll take this to a territorial judge. You do what you need to do. Miss Carter, Mr. Hale, you're free to go. I'll be in touch as I learn more. Jacob took Noah's hand and ushered Evelyn toward the door. As they passed Victor, he leaned close enough that only she could hear. You think you've won? You have nothing, Evelyn. No money, no prospects, nowhere to go. You'll come crawling back to me, or you'll end up in the gutter where you belong. She met his eyes and saw the truth there. He didn't care about the money or the marriage. He cared about winning, about breaking her, about proving he could destroy anyone who defied him. I'd rather starve, she said quietly. Outside, the afternoon sun felt too bright, the air too thin. Evelyn's legs trembled as Jacob helped her into the wagon. Noah climbed up beside her, his small face pinched with worry. Is the bad man going to take you away? No, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. But even as she said it, she wondered if she was lying. Because Victor was right about one thing: she had nothing. And if the sheriff ruled in his favor, she'd have even less. They rode back toward the ranch in heavy silence. Halfway there, Jacob pulled the wagon off the road near a stand of cottonwoods and stopped. "Noah, go see if you can find any good skipping stones by the creek. Stay where I can see you." The boy scrambled down, clearly eager to escape the tension. Once he was out of earshot, Jacob turned to Evelyn. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have hit him. I made things worse." "You defended me. That's not something to apologize for." "He's going to use it against us. Paint me as violent. You as a woman of questionable morals. In a week, when the sheriff hasn't found enough evidence to dismiss his claim, you'll be forced to either marry him or pay him back. And we both know you can't pay." Evelyn stared at the mountains in the distance, their peaks sharp against the sky. "So what do I do?" Jacob was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "You marry me instead." She turned to stare at him. "What?" "Marry me. Tonight, tomorrow, soon as we can arrange it. If you're my wife, Victor's claim is void. The contract becomes meaningless. You'd be legally protected." "Jacob, you can't." "I'm not asking because I want to trap you," he said quickly. "I'm asking because it's the only way I can think of to keep you safe. It would be a business arrangement, nothing more. You'd have legal protection, a home, security. In return, you'd keep doing what you're already doing, helping with Noah, managing the household. We'd be partners, like you wanted with William Garrett, except honest." Evelyn's mind spun. It was insane. It was practical. It was terrifying. It was the most generous offer anyone had ever made her. "What about Sarah? You're still grieving. You said yourself you're barely keeping your head above water. Adding a wife—" "You've been my wife in everything but name for 6 weeks now," Jacob said. "You've brought life back to that house." Noah smiles again. "I can sleep sometimes without hearing him cry through the walls. You've given us both something to hold on to. I'm not offering you romance, Evelyn. I'm offering you survival. And maybe that's all either of us can manage right now." "People will talk." "Let them. They're already talking." She thought about Victor's sneering insinuations, the weight of judgment she'd felt in the sheriff's office, the way decent women had clutched their skirts aside when she'd walked past in Boston after her father died in debt. Reputation was a luxury she'd lost long ago. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "it would have to be real, legally binding. I won't enter a false marriage that you can dissolve when it becomes inconvenient. I wouldn't ask you to. When I make a vow, I keep it. And if someday you meet someone you actually want to marry, someone you love—" Jacob's laugh was bitter. "I had that. I buried it. I'm not looking for it again." It should have hurt, that flat declaration. But somehow it was a comfort. No false promises, no pretense of feelings that didn't exist, just honesty, raw and unvarnished. "Give me tonight to think about it," Evelyn said. "Take all the time you need. But Evelyn, whatever you decide, you're not going back to him. I'll find another way if this doesn't suit you." She believed him. This hard, grieving man with his careful hands and his broken heart, he'd find a way to protect her even if it cost him everything. And that was more than anyone else had ever offered. That night, after Noah was asleep, Evelyn sat on the porch watching the stars emerge like pinpricks in dark cloth. Jacob joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee, and they sat in silence for a while. "Tell me about Sarah," Evelyn said finally. Jacob's hands tightened around his cup. "Why?" "Because if I'm going to take her place in name, I should know who she was, what she meant to you." He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, the words came. "She was strong, not loud about it, just steady, like bedrock. Her father died when she was 16, left her this ranch, and she ran it herself for 4 years before I showed up looking for work. I thought she'd be some helpless girl needing rescue. Instead, she hired me, outworked me, and told me I was an idiot when I suggested something stupid." He smiled, the expression painful. "Took me a year to work up the courage to ask if she'd consider marrying me. She said yes before I finished the question, said she'd been waiting for me to catch up. She sounds remarkable." "She was. She made me want to be better than I was. Made me believe I could build something that mattered." His voice cracked.
Then she died trying to give me a second child, and I couldn't save her. Couldn't do a damn thing but watch her slip away. Evelyn set down her cup and did something that surprised them both. She reached over and took his hand. His fingers were rough, calloused, warm. I can't replace her, Jacob. I won't even try. But I can stand beside you, help you raise Noah, keep this ranch running, and maybe that's enough. He looked at their joined hands, then at her face. It's more than enough. It's everything. Then yes, I'll marry you. The words hung in the night air, binding as any vow. Jacob's grip tightened on her hand, and for a moment she thought she saw tears in his eyes. Tomorrow, he said, we'll ride into town tomorrow and find the preacher. Before Victor can scheme up something new, before the sheriff makes his ruling, we'll make it legal. Tomorrow, Evelyn agreed. Neither of them moved to go inside. They sat there under the stars, hands clasped, two people who'd lost everything finding something like hope in the ruins. Dawn came too quickly. Evelyn woke to the sound of Jacob moving through the house, the familiar rhythm of coffee being ground, the stove door creaking open. She dressed carefully in her best remaining dress, a simple gray wool that she'd brushed and pressed the night before. Her hands trembled as she pinned up her hair, and she had to start over twice before the pins would hold. When she emerged from her room, Jacob was standing at the stove in his Sunday clothes. Dark trousers, a white shirt she'd starched and ironed just days ago, a vest that stretched across his broad shoulders. He looked up when he heard her footsteps, and something flickered in his eyes. Coffee's ready. Thank you. They moved around each other with careful politeness, the weight of what they were about to do pressing down like a physical thing. Noah appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and stopped short when he saw them both dressed up. Where are we going? Jacob knelt down to his son's level. We're going into town. Miss Evelyn and I are getting married today. Noah's face transformed, sleep vanishing in an instant. Really? You mean it? Miss Evelyn's going to be my mama? If she's willing, Jacob said, glancing at Evelyn. She came and knelt beside them, taking Noah's small hands in hers. I'm willing, sweetheart, but you need to understand something. I'm not replacing your real mama. No one could ever do that. She'll always be your mama, always be in your heart. I'm going to be here for as long as you'll have me. Noah threw his arms around her neck so suddenly she almost lost her balance. I'll have you forever and ever. Over the boy's shoulder, she met Jacob's eyes and saw the same desperate hope she felt burning in her own chest. They were building something fragile here, something that could shatter with a single wrong word or misstep. But it was real, and it was theirs, and it was worth fighting for. The ride into town felt different this time. The morning sun painted everything gold, and the mountain seemed closer, more protective than threatening. Noah chattered the whole way, asking questions about the wedding, whether there would be cake, if he could wear his good shoes, oblivious to the tension coiling tighter with every mile. Cedar Ridge was already awake when they arrived, the streets busy with wagons and horses, people moving between shops with purpose. Jacob pulled up in front of a small white church with a steeple that reached toward the endless sky. The preacher, a thin man with kind eyes and silver hair, was sweeping the steps. Reverend Walsh, Jacob called. Got a moment? The preacher set aside his broom. Jacob Hale. It's been some time since I've seen you at services. What can I do for you? This is Evelyn Carter. We'd like to be married. Today, if possible. Reverend Walsh's eyebrows rose, but his expression remained carefully neutral. That's quite sudden. Have you considered the implications? The community will talk, especially given recent events. Let them talk, Jacob said flatly. We're here in good faith, asking for a legal Christian marriage. Will you perform the ceremony or not? The preacher studied them both, his gaze lingering on Evelyn. Miss Carter, are you entering this marriage of your own free will? You're not being coerced or forced in any way? No, Reverend. This is my choice. And you understand the sacred nature of these vows? That marriage is meant to be permanent, binding before man in heaven? I do. He looked at Jacob. You're still grieving Sarah. Everyone knows that. Are you certain you're ready for this? Sarah's gone, Jacob said, and the words came out rough but steady. She's been gone 6 months, and Noah needs a mother,
and this ranch needs a woman's hand. Evelyn and I have come to an understanding that suits us both. I'm asking you to bless it." Reverend Walsh was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. "Come inside. We'll need witnesses." The church was cool and dim, smelling of old wood and candle wax. The preacher sent his wife to fetch 2 neighbors who could serve as witnesses, and while they waited, Evelyn stood at the altar looking up at the simple cross mounted on the wall. She thought about her father, who'd wanted grandchildren and a good marriage for her. She thought about the life she'd imagined in Boston, the respectable match she'd once hoped for. All of it was ashes now, but somehow standing here in this rough frontier church felt more real than any of those polished dreams. The witnesses arrived, a severe-looking woman in black and a rancher Jacob knew slightly. They took their positions with expressions that ranged from curious to disapproving. Reverend Walsh opened his Bible, and the ceremony began. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of heaven to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The words washed over Evelyn like water. She heard herself repeating vows, heard Jacob's deeper voice echoing hers. His hand was warm and steady when he slipped a plain gold band on her finger, Sarah's ring, she realized with a jolt, and had to force herself not to pull away. This was practical, she reminded herself. Survival, not sentiment. "I now pronounce you man and wife. What heaven has joined, let no man tear asunder." Jacob kissed her cheek, brief and formal, and it was done. She was married to a man she'd known for 6 weeks, wearing a dead woman's ring, with witnesses who looked at her like she'd committed some elaborate fraud. They signed the marriage certificate. Reverend Walsh handed it to Jacob with a grave expression. "May heaven bless this union and grant you both wisdom and patience." "Thank you, Reverend." Outside, Noah was waiting on the church steps, and when they emerged, he launched himself at Evelyn. "Are you really my mama now?" "Really and truly." "Can I call you Mama instead of Miss Evelyn?" Evelyn looked at Jacob, who nodded slightly. "If you'd like to." "Mama," Noah tested the word, grinning. "Mama, Mama, Mama, can we get cake now?" "Let's see what the bakery has," Jacob said, and there was something almost soft in his voice. They walked down the main street as a family, and Evelyn felt the stairs following them like shadows. Women whispered behind gloved hands. Men watched with expressions ranging from sympathy to suspicion. Word would spread fast, the mail-order bride who'd caught herself a widower, the indecent haste, the scandal of it all. At the bakery, Noah pressed his face against the glass case, oohing over the cakes and pastries. Jacob ordered a small cake with white frosting, and the baker, a plump woman with flour in her hair, congratulated them with strained politeness. They were leaving the shop when a voice cut through the morning air like a blade. "Well, well, isn't this touching?" Victor Langdon stood across the street, his arms crossed, his expression a mixture of fury and cold calculation. He started toward them, and Jacob immediately positioned himself between Victor and Evelyn. "Stay back, Langdon. I heard a rumor this morning that sounded too absurd to be true, but here you are, playing happy family. Tell me, when exactly did you decide to marry my intended bride? Before or after you took her into your bed?" "Watch your mouth," Jacob growled. "Oh, I think we're past politeness, don't you? You've stolen what was mine, Hale. We had a legal contract." "Had," Evelyn said, stepping forward despite Jacob's attempt to shield her. "Past tense. That contract was for a marriage between Evelyn Carter and William Garrett. I'm Evelyn Hale now. Your claim is void." Victor's smile was vicious. "You think it's that simple? You think you can just marry another man and all your obligations disappear?" "That's exactly what I think. And if you disagree, take it up with a judge." "Oh, I will. I'll take this to the territorial court. I'll sue you both for conspiracy to defraud, breach of contract, theft. By the time I'm done, you'll lose that ranch, Hale. Everything you've built, gone to pay what she owes me." "You're bluffing," Jacob said, but there was uncertainty beneath the bravado. "Am I? Ask your lawyer what happens when someone deliberately interferes with a legal contract. Ask him about punitive damages." Victor's eyes glittered with malice. "You thought you were so clever, rushing off to get married before I could stop you. But all you've done is dig yourselves deeper. Now you're both liable."
Noah had started crying, clutching Evelyn's skirt. People had gathered, drawn by the raised voices, creating an audience for this public humiliation. Evelyn felt her face burning, but she refused to look down, refused to give Victor the satisfaction of seeing her cower. "Do whatever you want," she said clearly. "Sue us, drag us to court, spread your lies, but I will never be your wife, and I will never give you another cent. You're a predator and a fraud, and eventually, everyone will see it." Brave words from a woman with no money and no options. "How long do you think Hale will keep you when you've cost him everything?" Victor stepped closer, lowering his voice so only they could hear. "I could have given you an easy life, Evelyn. All you had to do was be obedient, know your place. Instead, you chose this: poverty, struggle, a man who doesn't even love you. When winter comes and the money runs out and that ranch fails, you'll wish you'd been smarter. I'd rather freeze to death than spend one day as your wife." Victor's mask of civility cracked completely. "You sanctimonious little whore! You think you're better than me? You're nothing, a desperate old maid who threw herself at the first man stupid enough to take pity on her. You're not a wife, you're a burden, and you'll destroy him just like you destroyed everyone else who was foolish enough to care about you." Jacob moved so fast Evelyn didn't see it coming. His fist caught Victor square in the mouth, sending him sprawling into the dirt. Blood poured from Victor's split lip, and when he looked up, there was something feral in his eyes. "You'll pay for that," he hissed. "Assault, in front of witnesses. The sheriff will hear that you were harassing my wife and making threats," Jacob said coldly. "And every person here saw you throw the first insult. You want to press charges, go ahead, but it'll just give me another chance to tell everyone exactly what kind of man you are." Victor climbed to his feet, dabbing at his bloody mouth. His eyes swept the crowd, calculating, and Evelyn saw him adjust his strategy in real time. "Fine," he said, his voice carrying to the gathered onlookers. "I'll let the law handle this. But mark my words, this isn't over, not by a long shot." He stalked off toward the sheriff's office, leaving Jacob and Evelyn standing in the middle of the street with Noah sobbing between them and half the town watching like it was a theater performance. Reverend Walsh materialized at Jacob's elbow. "You better come with me, both of you, before this gets worse." They followed him back to the church, Noah still crying, the cake forgotten in its box. In the Reverend's small office, Evelyn collapsed into a chair while Jacob paced like a caged animal. "That was foolish, Jacob," Reverend Walsh said quietly. "Hitting him in public with witnesses. He called my wife a whore. What was I supposed to do?" "Walk away. Let his words expose him for what he is instead of proving his point about your temper." The preacher turned to Evelyn. "Mrs. Hale, I need you to be honest with me. Is there any truth to his claims? Did you sign a contract with him?" "He forged my signature. I have proof. The letters I sent him, my actual handwriting. Sheriff Brennan was supposed to investigate." "And the money? Did you send him funds?" $215, yes. He requested it to help establish our household before I arrived. I was a fool to trust him." "Trust isn't foolishness, though it can be misplaced." Reverend Walsh steepled his fingers. "Here's what concerns me. Even if the contract is fraudulent, even if Victor Langdon is everything you say he is, he's got enough documentation to make your lives very difficult. Courts don't move quickly out here, and in the meantime, you'll be living under a cloud of suspicion. Your marriage will be questioned. Your reputations will suffer." "They're already suffering," Evelyn said bitterly. "True, but it can get worse, much worse." He paused. "There's also the question of what happens if he actually takes this to court and wins. I'm not a lawyer, but I've seen cases where judges ruled that a subsequent marriage doesn't void a prior contract if there's evidence of conspiracy. If they decide you two married specifically to avoid his legal claim, they could annul your marriage and rule in his favor." The words hit like physical blows. Evelyn's vision swam. "They could annul it? It's possible, especially if he can prove you married purely to escape your obligations to him." Jacob stopped pacing. "So what are you saying? We should just give up? Let him win?" "No, I'm saying you need to be prepared for a fight that could last months and cost you everything. And you need to decide if you're willing to pay that price."